The F-22 Raptor sat silent on the tarmac at Nellis Air Force Base, its angular stealth frame gleaming like polished obsidian in the Nevada dawn. $65 million of the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built, and it was grounded, dead. The kind of mechanical failure that made colonels sweat and generals ask uncomfortable questions. 3 different maintenance crews had tried to diagnose the problem over the past 6 hours. 3 crews had failed. The Raptor's computers showed green across the board, but the aircraft refused to start. No fault codes, no warning lights, just expensive silence that was costing the Air Force $30,000 every hour it sat on the ground. That was when Senior Airman Maya Chen walked across the flight line carrying a toolkit that looked older than she was. Small-framed, quiet, wearing a maintenance uniform with grease stains that told the story of late nights spent elbow-deep in engine compartments. To the frustrated pilots watching from the squadron building, she looked like just another wrench-turner, another junior enlisted airman sent to take a hopeless shot at a problem that had already stumped the experts. They had no idea they were watching a ghost return to the sky. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The morning briefing had been brutal. Colonel James Harrison, 412th Test Wing Commander, stood at the front of the room with the kind of expression that suggested someone's career was about to end badly. Behind him, a PowerPoint slide displayed the harsh mathematics of mission failure. 12 hours behind schedule, 360,000 in lost operational time, and a congressional delegation arriving in 6 hours expecting to see America's premier air superiority fighter in action. Gentlemen, Harrison's voice carried the weight of 30 years in Air Force aviation. We have a problem. Raptor 914012 is down hard and nobody can tell me why. The manufacturer's technical team is 6 hours out. The backup aircraft has a cracked engine mount, and in 6 hours, Senator Williams and the Armed Services Committee are going to be standing on this tarmac, expecting to see a demonstration that justifies a $200 billion program. Major Rick Volkov, the lead test pilot, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that came from flying aircraft most people would never be qualified to touch. He had logged more hours in the F-22 than any pilot on base, knew every system, every quirk, every sound the aircraft made. But right now, his expertise felt worthless. "Sir," Volkov's voice carried frustration barely held in check, "we've run every diagnostic in the book. The bird should fly. Everything looks perfect on paper, but when we hit the start sequence, nothing happens. It's like the aircraft is refusing to wake up." Nellis Zhang, the maintenance officer, looked equally frustrated. "Sir, my crews have been over that aircraft 3 times. We've checked every connection, every circuit, every line. According to every test we can run, there's nothing wrong with it. But it won't start, and we can't figure out why." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Captain, with respect, we can't figure out why isn't an answer I can give to Congress. Find me someone who can get that bird in the air, or find me a different bird to fly." That was when Senior Master Sergeant Dave Torres spoke up from the back of the room. 25 years in aircraft maintenance, most of it spent on the most complex fighters the Air Force had ever built. His voice carried the measured tone of someone who had seen every kind of mechanical failure imaginable. "Sir, there's one more option. We've got a new airman who just transferred in 3 weeks ago. Senior Airman Chen. She's been working nights on the backup birds, and she's got a different approach to troubleshooting." Volkov turned in his seat, eyebrows raised. "Sarge, this isn't a training exercise. We're talking about a $65 million aircraft that needs to be perfect in 6 hours. You want to put a brand new airman on it?" Torres met his gaze steadily. "Major, I've been working on fighters since before she was born. And I've never seen anyone read aircraft systems the way she does. She doesn't just follow checklists. She listens to what the aircraft is telling her." Harrison's expression shifted slightly. "What's her background?" Torres pulled out a tablet, tapping quickly. "Senior Airman Maya Chen. Transferred in from... Actually, sir, her previous assignment is redacted. All I've got is that she completed advanced avionics training at Shepherd with the highest scores in the course's history. Her technical evaluations are off the charts, but her service record before 3 weeks ago is mostly blank." Zhang frowned. That's unusual. Why would a senior airman's record be redacted? Above my pay grade, ma'am, Torres replied. But I can tell you this. Yesterday, she diagnosed an intermittent electrical fault in Raptor 91-8 that our manufacturer tech reps missed. Fixed it in 20 minutes. Whatever her background is, she understands these birds. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that all felt like gambles. Finally, he spoke. Get her. But Sergeant Torres, if this goes wrong, if that aircraft gets damaged because we put an untested airman on a critical repair, you and I are going to have a very unpleasant conversation. Understood, sir. Outside on the flight line, Maya Chen was exactly where Torres knew she would be. Underneath Raptor 91-4008, running post-maintenance checks on the electrical system she had repaired the day before. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, testing connections, verifying voltages, her trained ear listening to the subtle sounds that told the story of how the aircraft's systems were functioning. She didn't look like anyone's idea of an elite technician. At 26, she was small and slight, her uniform always perfectly pressed despite the grease stains that came with hands-on maintenance work. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. No makeup, no jewelry, except for a worn silver watch that looked like it had seen hard use. When she worked, she moved with the kind of quiet focus that made people forget she was there, which was exactly how she preferred it. Chen, Torres's voice carried across the hangar floor. Need you on the flight line. Priority job. She slid out from under the aircraft, wiping her hands on a rag as she stood. What's the situation, Sergeant? The VIP bird is down. 3 crews have tried to fix it. Colonel wants you to take a look. Maya's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something that might have been recognition or memory, or the kind of careful calculation that came with knowing more than you were supposed to say. Understood. Give me 5 minutes to grab my kit. As she walked toward her toolbox, Torres studied her movement. There was something about the way she carried herself that didn't quite match her record. The confidence was too quiet, too controlled. The awareness was too sharp for someone who had supposedly spent her entire career in routine maintenance. And there was something else. Something in the way she looked at the F-22s that suggested familiarity beyond what any maintenance tech should have. But right now, with a congressional delegation 6 hours out and a $65 million aircraft refusing to start, questions about background could wait. Results couldn't. Maya opened her toolbox and pulled out a diagnostic tablet that looked more advanced than standard issue equipment. She powered it up, entered her credentials, and began uploading files that definitely weren't in the standard technical manual. For just a moment, as the screen populated with schematics and data sets that shouldn't exist, her face showed something that looked very much like a pilot studying flight plans. Then the screen went back to normal maintenance displays, and she was just another airman heading out to fix another broken bird. Torres watched her walk toward the flight line, toolkit in hand, and felt that familiar itch between his shoulder blades that came when something wasn't quite what it appeared to be. He'd been in the Air Force long enough to recognize when someone was hiding in plain sight. The question was what Senior Airman Maya Chen was hiding, and why. On the tarmac, the disabled F-22 waited in the morning sun, its stealth coating absorbing heat and light while its systems remained stubbornly dark. 3 maintenance crews had failed to wake it up. The manufacturer's best technicians were still hours away. And now, a quiet senior airman with a redacted service record was walking toward it with the kind of steady confidence that suggested she knew exactly what she was going to find. The pilots watching from the squadron building saw a last-ditch attempt by junior enlisted personnel to solve a problem beyond their skill level. They had no idea they were about to witness the return of someone who knew the F-22's systems better than anyone alive. Someone who had once been called Ghost Commander by the pilots who trusted her with their lives. Someone who had been grounded, buried, and hidden for reasons that were classified above the security clearance of everyone watching. Maya Chen reached the aircraft, set down her toolkit, and looked up at the sleek fighter with eyes that held recognition deeper than professional familiarity. She placed one hand on the aircraft's fuselage, a gesture that could have been checking for damage, but looked more like greeting an old friend. Then she opened her tablet, entered a code that definitely wasn't in any manual, and began the process of waking up an aircraft that had been waiting 3 years for her to find her way back to the sky. Maya Chen approached the grounded F-22 with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything else. Her boots made soft sounds against the tarmac as she walked around the aircraft, her trained eyes scanning every external panel, every access port, every indicator that might tell her what 3 previous crews had missed. The pilots watching from the squadron building weren't trying to hide their skepticism. Major Volkov stood at the window, arms crossed, shaking his head as he watched the small figure circle the $65 million fighter. "This is what we've come to," he said to Captain Sarah Mitchell, the squadron's weapons systems officer. "Sending junior enlisted to fix what the experts couldn't?" Mitchell, a 15-year veteran with more F-22 flight hours than most pilots would see in their entire careers, watched Maya with professional curiosity rather than dismissal. "Maybe fresh eyes will see something the others missed." "Fresh eyes don't replace experience," Volkov replied. "That airman probably hasn't been in the Air Force long enough to understand how complex these systems are. The F-22 isn't some trainer aircraft you can fix with basic troubleshooting." Captain Jake Torres, Senior Master Sergeant Torres's younger brother and one of the squadron's test pilots, joined them at the window. He had inherited the family's respect for good maintenance personnel, but even he looked doubtful. "I mean, I get that Torres vouched for her," Jake said. "But this is different. We're talking about systems integration that took Lockheed Martin's best engineers years to perfect. How's someone straight out of tech school supposed to diagnose what their own manufacturer reps can't figure out?" Outside, Maya had completed her external inspection and was now opening access panels with movements that looked more practiced than any recent graduate should possess. She worked methodically, checking connections and running quick voltage tests with her handheld meter. Lieutenant Ben Crawford, the youngest pilot in the squadron, pressed closer to the window. "She moves like she's done this before." "She's probably following a checklist," Volkov said dismissively. "Standard troubleshooting procedures. She'll run through the same tests the other crews did, come up with the same non-results, and we'll be back to waiting for the manufacturer." In the maintenance office, Senior Master Sergeant Torres was fielding questions from Chief Master Sergeant Patricia Reeves, the base's senior enlisted advisor. Reeves had 30 years of Air Force experience and the kind of institutional memory that made her opinion carry weight with colonels and generals alike. "Dave, help me understand this," Reeves said, leaning back in her chair. "You've got 3 experienced crews who couldn't solve this problem, and you want to put a senior airman with 3 weeks on station on a mission-critical aircraft?" Torres met her gaze steadily. "Chief, I know how it sounds, but there's something about Chen that doesn't add up. Her technical knowledge goes deeper than her rank suggests. The way she approaches problems, it's like she's seeing things the rest of us miss." "Or she's lucky," Reeves replied. "One successful repair doesn't make her qualified for this level of responsibility." "Maybe not," Torres acknowledged, "but we're running out of options, and she's the only person who hasn't failed yet." Back on the flight line, Maya had moved to the aircraft's main diagnostic port. She connected her tablet and began running tests that definitely weren't in the standard maintenance manual. Her fingers moved across the screen with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested deep familiarity with systems that most airmen never accessed. What she was seeing on her screen would have surprised the pilots watching from inside. The F-22's computers were running background processes that weren't supposed to exist, security protocols and authentication routines that had been quietly installed 3 years ago and never documented in any technical manual that reached the field. Maya knew about them because she had helped design them. The aircraft wasn't broken, it was locked down, waiting for the right access codes to unlock systems that most people didn't know existed. Someone had activated protocols that were supposed to be used only in the most extreme circumstances, and then either forgotten about them or deliberately left them in place. She entered a series of commands that would have raised serious questions if anyone had been looking over her shoulder. Administrator-level access codes that shouldn't exist, system overrides that weren't documented anywhere, and authentication keys that were supposedly known only to a handful of people with security clearances above top secret. The F-22's systems came alive immediately. Not gradually, not with the slow spin-up that characterized normal startup procedures, but instantly. as if the aircraft had been waiting for exactly this sequence of inputs. Maya's expression didn't change, but her hands paused for just a moment on the keyboard. 3 years. 3 years since she had last accessed these systems legitimately. 3 years since the incident that had ended her career as a test pilot and buried her in a maintenance role where no one would ask questions about her background. She ran a quick diagnostic to verify that all systems were functioning normally, then began the process of securing her access before anyone could notice what she had really done. As far as the official logs would show, she had simply performed a standard system reset that had somehow resolved an intermittent fault. Inside the squadron building, the pilots watched in stunned silence as external indicators began lighting up on the F-22. Navigation lights, status displays, even the subtle glow that indicated the aircraft's computers were running normally. "What the hell?" Volkov muttered. "How did she do that?" Captain Mitchell leaned closer to the window. Maybe she really did find something the others missed. Or maybe it was just an intermittent problem that chose this moment to resolve itself, Volkov said, but his voice lacked conviction. He had seen too many mechanical failures to believe in convenient coincidences. On the flight line, Maya was already packing up her equipment. She had been working on the aircraft for less than 20 minutes, but every system was now showing green. She closed the diagnostic panel, secured her tablet, and began the walk back to the maintenance hangar. She made it about 50 feet before Colonel Harrison intercepted her, his stride purposeful and his expression a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Airman Chen," he said, stopping directly in her path. "Explain to me what just happened." Maya came to attention, her voice calm and professional. "Sir, the aircraft had a software fault in the primary flight computer. I performed a system reset and cleared the error logs. All systems are now functioning normally." "A software fault," Harrison repeated slowly. 3 crews, including manufacturer technicians, checked that aircraft top to bottom. How did they miss a simple software fault?" "Sometimes intermittent problems don't show up until you run the right diagnostic sequence, sir," Maya replied. "I used a different approach than the previous crews." It was technically true, though it left out the part about classified access codes and security protocols that weren't supposed to exist. Harrison studied her for a long moment, clearly sensing that there was more to the story than she was sharing. "What's your background, Airman Chen? Where did you learn to work on F-22 systems?" Maya's pause was so brief that most people wouldn't have noticed it, but Harrison caught it, and it told him that whatever answer he was about to get wasn't the complete truth. "Advanced avionics training at NAR, Shepherd Air Force Base, sir. Specialized in fly-by-wire flight control systems." "That's not what I asked," Harrison said, his voice taking on an edge. "I asked where you learned to work on F-22 systems specifically. The training you described doesn't cover the level of system integration you just demonstrated." Before Maya could answer, Major Volkov emerged from the squadron building, his expression caught between grudging admiration and professional skepticism. He approached the pair with the measured stride of someone who wasn't entirely sure what he had just witnessed. "Colonel," Volkov said, "I'd like to run a full pre-flight check on that aircraft. If Airman Chen really did fix whatever was wrong, I want to verify that all systems are fully operational before we commit to the demonstration." Harrison nodded. "Agreed. Chen, you'll assist Major Volkov with the pre-flight. I want you to explain every repair you made and verify that your fix will hold under operational conditions." Maya's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something that might have been anticipation or concern, or the kind of careful calculation that came with knowing you were about to be tested in ways that went far beyond technical competence. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'll gather my equipment." As she walked back toward the hangar, Volkov fell into step beside her. His voice was quieter now, less confrontational, but still probing. 20 minutes, he said. 3 crews worked on that bird for 6 hours, and you fixed it in 20 minutes. Either you're the best maintenance tech I've ever seen, or you got very lucky." Maya kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. "Sometimes you just need to approach a problem from a different angle, sir." "What angle was that exactly?" This time the pause was longer, more noticeable. When Maya spoke again, her voice carried a different quality, not evasive, but careful in a way that suggested she was choosing her words with unusual precision. The F-22's systems are more integrated than most people realize, sir. Sometimes what looks like a mechanical failure is actually a software issue, and sometimes what looks like a software issue is actually a security protocol responding to something that doesn't belong. Volkov stopped walking. Security protocol? What kind of security protocol? Maya stopped too, turning to face him directly. For just a moment, her professional mask slipped, and Volkov saw something in her eyes that didn't match her rank or her supposed background. Knowledge that went deeper than any technical manual, familiarity that suggested experience rather than training. Sir, I'd recommend running a full systems check before the demonstration. There may be other issues that haven't manifested yet. It wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it. But before Volkov could press further, Senior Master Sergeant Torres appeared beside them, his expression troubled. Major, we've a problem. The manufacturer's tech team just called. They're not 6 hours out anymore. They're grounded due to weather and won't be here until tomorrow morning. Volkov's face went pale. Tomorrow morning? The congressional delegation is here in 5 hours. Yes, sir. Which means Airman Chen's repair is the only thing standing between us and a very uncomfortable conversation with Senator Williams. The three of them stood in the Nevada heat, the weight of that reality settling over them like dust. A senior airman with 3 weeks on station and a redacted service record had just become the most important person on the base, and none of them had any idea who she really was. The F-22 sat on the tarmac like a sleeping predator, its systems humming with quiet efficiency after Maya's 20-minute repair. Major Volkov approached the aircraft with the measured steps of someone who had learned to trust his instincts over official reports, and right now his instincts were telling him that something about this situation didn't add up. Chen, he called out as Maya gathered her diagnostic equipment, walk me through exactly what you found. Maya set down her toolkit and approached the aircraft with him. As they moved around the fighter's angular frame, Volkov noticed something he had missed during his earlier observations. Her eyes didn't scan the aircraft the way a maintenance technician's would, checking for obvious problems, following standard inspection patterns. Instead, she looked at it the way pilots looked at their birds, reading the aircraft's posture, its stance on the landing gear, the subtle signs that told a story beyond what any checklist could reveal. The primary flight computer was locked in a security subroutine, Maya said, her voice remaining professionally neutral. The aircraft systems were waiting for authentication before allowing normal startup procedures. Security subroutine? Volkov frowned. I've never heard of anything like that. The F-22 doesn't have security locks that prevent engine start. Maya paused at the main landing gear, running her hand along the strut with a familiarity that spoke of countless hours spent around this specific type of aircraft. Sir, with respect, there are a lot of systems on the F-22 that aren't covered in standard pilot training. The comment hit Volkov oddly. It was technically correct. Pilots focused on flying the aircraft, not maintaining it, but something about the way she said it suggested knowledge that went beyond technical manuals. Before he could follow up, she continued. The authentication routine is designed to activate if the aircraft detects certain types of electromagnetic signatures or if someone attempts to access classified subsystems without proper authorization. What kind of electromagnetic signatures? Maya's pause was brief but noticeable. Foreign radar systems, sir, electronic warfare equipment, certain types of diagnostic tools that aren't supposed to exist in most maintenance environments. Volkov stopped walking. Are you saying someone tried to hack into this aircraft? I'm saying the aircraft thought someone did, Maya replied carefully. The security routine can be triggered by equipment that generates the wrong kind of electronic signature, even if that wasn't the intent. It was a plausible explanation, the kind of technical detail that made sense in the context of an aircraft designed to operate in the most hostile electronic environments on Earth. But something about Maya's delivery, too smooth, too prepared, made Volkov think she was telling him a story that was true enough to pass inspection, but incomplete enough to hide something important. They continued around the aircraft, Maya pointing out various systems and explaining their functions with a depth of knowledge that went far beyond what her supposed training should have provided. She spoke about the F-22's integrated avionics suite with the casual familiarity of someone who had spent years working with the systems, not months, learning about them from manuals. The flight control computers are designed to work in parallel, she explained, opening an access panel near the wing root. If one system detects an anomaly, it can isolate itself from the network to prevent contamination of other subsystems. Sometimes that isolation can cascade, leaving the aircraft unable to complete normal startup procedures. Volkov leaned in to look at the connection she was indicating. How do you know all this? This level of system integration isn't covered in basic avionics training. Maya's hands continued working as she spoke, checking connections with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from muscle memory rather than conscious thought. I had some additional training, sir, specialized courses that covered advanced troubleshooting techniques. What kind of specialized courses? Another pause, longer this time. Maya closed the access panel and stood, meeting Volkov's gaze directly. For just a moment, he saw something in her eyes that didn't match her rank or her supposed background, a depth of experience that suggested she had seen things, done things that went far beyond routine maintenance work. I'm sorry, sir, but some of that training is classified. I can't discuss the specific courses or the techniques they covered. It was exactly the kind of non-answer that made Volkov's instincts spike. In his experience, airmen who claimed classified training either were lying or were telling the truth about something much more significant than they were willing to admit. Before he could press further, Captain Mitchell appeared beside them, her expression troubled. Rick, we need to talk. Something's come up. Volkov glanced at Maya, then back at Mitchell. What kind of something? The kind that needs to be discussed in private, Mitchell said, her eyes flicking meaningfully toward Maya. Chen, Volkov said, continue your pre-flight checks. I want a full systems verification before we even think about powering up for the demonstration. Yes, sir, Maya replied, already turning back to her equipment. As the two officers walked away, Mitchell kept her voice low. I just got off the phone with a friend at Air Force Personnel Center. I asked her to run a quick background check on our miracle maintenance tech. And Senior Airman Maya Chen's service record is more classified than some black programs I've worked on. My friend couldn't tell me anything except that Chen's previous assignment required a security clearance that most colonels don't have. Volkov felt his stomach tighten. What kind of assignment requires that level of clearance for a senior airman? The kind that doesn't exist on paper, Mitchell said grimly. Rick, we need to consider the possibility that Chen isn't what she appears to be. You think she's some kind of security risk? I think she's someone who was doing something very classified until very recently, and now she's been reassigned to a maintenance role for reasons we're not cleared to know about. They stopped walking, both officers turning to look back at Maya, who was now deep in conversation with her diagnostic tablet, running tests that neither of them recognized. From a distance, she looked exactly like what her paperwork said she was, a junior enlisted airman performing routine maintenance tasks. But up close, watching her work, it was becoming increasingly obvious that there was nothing routine about her knowledge or her capabilities. What do we do? Volkov asked. We finish the pre-flight, Mitchell said. We get that aircraft ready for the demonstration, and then we ask some very serious questions about who Senior Airman Chen really is and why she was sent to our squadron. Back at the F-22, Maya was accessing systems that definitely weren't covered in any maintenance manual. Her tablet displayed schematics and diagnostic routines that existed only in the most classified corners of the aircraft's software architecture. She was running checks on subsystems that most pilots didn't know existed, verifying that her earlier access hadn't triggered any security alerts that would require explanation. As she worked, she became aware of someone watching her from across the flight line. Senior Master Sergeant Torres stood near the hangar entrance, his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. He had been observing her work for the past several minutes, and Maya could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Torres had 30 years of experience reading people, and he was seeing things that didn't match the official story. The confidence in her movements, the depth of her technical knowledge, the way she interacted with the F-22 systems as if she'd been working on them for years rather than weeks. Maya finished her diagnostic routine and began securing her equipment. She had found what she was looking for, confirmation that the aircraft's most Sensitive systems were functioning normally, and that her earlier access hadn't left any traces that would raise questions. The F-22 was ready to fly, ready to perform for the congressional delegation, ready to justify its enormous cost and strategic importance. What Maya hadn't counted on was how much attention her success would draw. Word was already spreading through the squadron that the new maintenance airman had fixed a problem that had stumped everyone else. People were starting to ask questions about her background, her training, her impossibly deep knowledge of systems that most technicians never encountered. As she walked back toward the hangar, Maya caught fragments of conversations that made her realize her cover was beginning to slip. Pilots and maintenance personnel were speculating about her previous assignment, her security clearance, the reasons why someone with her evident capabilities would be assigned to a routine maintenance role. She had spent 3 years learning to be invisible, to blend into the background of routine military operations where no one asked uncomfortable questions about the past. But success had a way of drawing attention, and attention was the last thing someone with her history could afford. Torres was waiting for her near the hangar entrance, his expression unreadable. When she approached, he gestured for her to follow him into his office, closing the door behind them with deliberate care. "Airman Chen," he said, settling behind his desk, "we need to have a conversation." Maya remained standing, her posture professionally correct, her expression neutral. "Yes, Sergeant. In 30 years of aircraft maintenance, I've seen a lot of technicians, a lot of approaches to problem solving. I've worked with factory reps, test engineers, pilots who moonlighted as mechanics." Torres leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've never seen anyone work the way you do." "I don't understand, Sergeant. You fixed that F-22 in 20 minutes. You accessed diagnostic routines I've never seen before. You talked about security subroutines that aren't mentioned in any technical manual I've read." Torres's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "And you did it all with the kind of confidence that comes from experience, not training." Maya said nothing, but Torres saw something flicker behind her eyes, recognition that she was being evaluated by someone who knew enough to ask the right questions. "Your service record is classified above my clearance level," Torres continued. "Your technical knowledge goes deeper than any maintenance training I know about, and you handle yourself around that F-22 like someone who spent a lot more time with the aircraft than 3 weeks. He paused, letting the implications settle. "So I'm going to ask you directly. Who are you really, and what were you doing before you showed up at my maintenance hangar?" Maya met his gaze steadily, and for a moment, Torres saw something that confirmed every suspicion he had been developing. This wasn't a junior enlisted airman. This was someone with experience, authority, and knowledge that went far beyond anything her current role should have provided. When she spoke, her voice carried a different quality than before, not the careful deference of a subordinate, but the measured response of someone who was used to being trusted with secrets that could change the course of wars. "Sergeant, I can't discuss my previous assignment. What I can tell you is that I'm here to do a job, and that job is keeping aircraft flying safely and effectively." "That's not an answer, Chen." "It's the only answer I can give you, Sergeant." Torres studied her for a long moment, seeing confirmation in her refusal to elaborate. Someone with her evident capabilities didn't get buried in a maintenance role without very good reasons, reasons that were probably classified at levels he would never be cleared to understand. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but understand this. If you're here because someone wanted you to keep a low profile, that just became a lot harder. People are going to start asking questions about how a senior airman fixed what everyone else couldn't. Questions that might lead to answers you don't want to give." Maya's expression shifted slightly, showing the first crack in her professional composure. Torres was right, and they both knew it. Success had a price, and for someone trying to stay invisible, that price might be higher than she could afford to pay. Outside the office, the F-22 sat ready for its demonstration, its systems humming with quiet efficiency. In a few hours, senators and generals would watch it perform maneuvers that showcased American air superiority. They would see the culmination of decades of engineering excellence and billions of dollars in development costs. What they wouldn't see was the woman who had made it possible, the woman whose real identity was classified above their security clearances, whose previous assignment had ended in circumstances that required her to disappear into the anonymous ranks of routine maintenance personnel. But invisibility was becoming harder to maintain with each question, each suspicious glance, each moment of attention her competence drew. Maya Chen was about to learn that sometimes the hardest part of staying hidden wasn't avoiding detection. It was succeeding so completely that hiding was no longer possible. The congressional delegation arrived at Nellis Air Force Base in a convoy of black SUVs that kicked up dust clouds visible from the flight line. Senator Patricia Williams stepped out of the lead vehicle, her silver hair catching the Nevada sun as she surveyed the assembled aircraft with the sharp eyes of someone who had spent 15 years on the Armed Services Committee. Behind her, 3 other senators and a handful of defense analysts emerged, all wearing the expressions of people who had traveled a long way to see something that had better be worth the trip. Colonel Harrison stood at attention as the delegation approached, his uniform crisp despite the heat. Behind him, the F-22 Raptor gleamed on the tarmac, its angular frame seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Every external panel was perfect, every system indicator showed green, and the aircraft sat ready to demonstrate why Congress had invested $200 billion in the most advanced fighter ever built. What none of the VIPs could see was the tension radiating from the pilots and maintenance personnel scattered around the flight line. Too many people knew that this perfect-looking aircraft had been completely dead 6 hours ago, brought back to life by a junior enlisted airman whose background raised more questions than answers. "Senator Williams," Harrison said, extending his hand, "welcome to Nellis. We're honored to have you here today." "Colonel Harrison," Williams replied, her handshake firm and brief. "I'll be direct. We're here because the Armed Services Committee needs to justify the F-22 program's continued funding. Recent questions about operational readiness and cost overruns have some of my colleagues wondering if we're getting adequate return on investment." Harrison's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, I think today's demonstration will address any concerns about the F-22's capabilities and readiness." "I hope so, because if it doesn't, this program is going to face some very difficult budget discussions next year." The unspoken threat hung in the air between them, like heat shimmer. Harrison gestured toward the aircraft. "If you'll follow me, I'll introduce you to Major Volkov, our test pilot for today's demonstration." As the group moved toward the F-22, Maya Chen watched from the maintenance hangar, her position giving her a clear view of the proceedings while keeping her well out of sight. She wore a clean flight suit now, the grease stains scrubbed away, but she remained exactly what she appeared to be, a maintenance technician whose job was to keep aircraft flying, not to interact with senators and generals. Major Volkov approached the delegation with confident strides, his flight suit crisp, his helmet tucked under his arm with practiced ease. He looked exactly like what Hollywood would cast as a fighter pilot, tall, square-jawed, radiating the kind of competence that came from years of flying aircraft that most people would never be qualified to touch. "Senator Williams," Volkov said, his voice carrying clearly across the tarmac, "it's an honor to demonstrate the F-22's capabilities for you today. This aircraft represents the pinnacle of American air superiority technology." Williams studied the sleek fighter with professional interest. "Major, we've read the specifications. What we need to see is operational performance. Can this aircraft do what the Air Force claims it can do?" "Ma'am, the F-22 can engage multiple targets simultaneously while remaining invisible to enemy radar. It can supercruise at Mach 1.5 without afterburners, giving it unprecedented range and endurance, and its integrated avionics suite provides situational awareness that no other fighter in the world can match." "Those are impressive claims, Major. Show us." Volkov nodded toward the aircraft. "Ma'am, today's demonstration will include high-speed passes, tactical maneuvers, and a simulated air-to-air engagement against multiple targets. You'll see why the F-22 is considered the most capable fighter aircraft ever built." As Volkov began his pre-flight walk around, Maya felt her stomach tighten. She had verified every system on that aircraft, had personally ensured that the repairs would hold under operational stress. But the F-22's most complex systems had a way of developing problems at the worst possible moments, and a demonstration flight in front of congressional oversight was exactly the kind of high-stakes situation where equipment failures became career-ending disasters. That was when the first alarm sounded, not from the F-22, from the base's air traffic control tower. A sharp, electronic tone that made everyone on the flight line look up simultaneously. The tower controller's voice crackled over the loudspeakers with professional urgency. All aircraft, this is Nellis Tower. We have an unidentified aircraft approaching restricted airspace from the northeast. All demonstration flights are suspended pending identification and intercept. Colonel Harrison's face went pale. An unidentified aircraft during a congressional demonstration was the kind of security incident that ended careers and sparked investigations. He grabbed his radio, keying the microphone with barely controlled tension. "Tower, this is Harrison. What's the nature of the contact?" "Sir, we have a single aircraft, military configuration, squawking emergency codes. Aircraft is not responding to radio calls and appears to be experiencing some kind of system failure." Senator Williams stepped closer to Harrison, her expression sharp. "Colonel, what exactly is happening here?" Before Harrison could respond, the tower controller's voice returned, more urgent now. "All stations, the unidentified aircraft is a Marine FA-18 Super Hornet, showing signs of hydraulic failure. Aircraft is trailing fluid and appears to be attempting an emergency landing. Pilot is unconscious or incapacitated." Maya's blood went cold. An emergency landing with an unconscious pilot wasn't just dangerous, it was potentially catastrophic. Nellis's runways were surrounded by populated areas, and an uncontrolled aircraft crash could kill hundreds of people. Major Volkov was already moving toward the F-22's cockpit. "Sir, request permission to launch and provide assistance to the emergency aircraft." "Negative," Harrison replied immediately. "We don't have clearance for intercept operations during a congressional demonstration." "Sir, that pilot may be dying up there." "Major, we have procedures for this. The emergency will be handled by—" The controller's voice cut through their argument with devastating clarity. "All stations, the emergency aircraft has entered final approach corridor. Pilot is confirmed unconscious. Aircraft is not aligned with runway and appears to be heading for civilian areas east of the base." Maya found herself moving before conscious thought could stop her. She walked out of the hangar, across the tarmac, directly toward the cluster of officials and officers who were arguing about protocols while a pilot died in the sky above them. "Sir," she said, her voice cutting through the debate with quiet authority, "I need to get that F-22 airborne." Harrison turned toward her, his expression caught between confusion and irritation. "Airman, get back to your assigned area. This is not your concern." "Sir, with respect, that Super Hornet is going to crash into populated areas unless someone intercepts it and provides guidance. The F-22 is the only aircraft on the base capable of matching the Hornet's performance characteristics." "Airman, you're a maintenance technician. This is a pilot decision, not—" "Colonel," Maya interrupted, her voice carrying a different quality now. Not the careful deference of a subordinate, but the measured urgency of someone who had been in situations like this before. "That pilot has maybe 3 minutes before he crashes into downtown Las Vegas. You can spend those 3 minutes debating protocol, or you can let me get up there and save his life." The words hung in the desert air like a thunderclap. Every person within earshot, pilots, maintenance personnel, senators, security guards, turned to stare at the small airman who had just claimed she could fly the most advanced fighter aircraft ever built. Major Volkov's mouth actually fell open. "You want a what?" "Sir, I'm rated on the F-22. I can intercept that Super Hornet, establish communications with ground control, and guide it to a safe landing area away from civilian populations." "You're rated," Volkov started, then stopped. "That's impossible. You're enlisted maintenance. You can't be pilot qualified on the F-22. Maya met his gaze directly, and for the first time since arriving at Nellis, she let her mask slip completely. What Volkov saw in her eyes wasn't the careful deference of a junior airman. It was the calm confidence of someone who had flown combat missions in aircraft that most pilots would never be cleared to touch. "Sir, my name is Major Maya Chen, call sign Ghost Commander. I'm a test pilot with over 800 hours in the F-22, including classified missions that required capabilities this aircraft was never supposed to have. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause as the implications of her words settled over the assembled group. Senator Williams found her voice first. "Major, you're not a senior airman?" "Ma'am, I've been operating under deep cover for the past 3 years following a classified incident. My records were sealed and I was assigned to maintenance duties for security reasons." Maya's voice remained calm, but there was urgency underneath. "Right now, none of that matters. What matters is that there's a pilot dying in the sky above us, and I'm the only person here qualified to save him." Harrison's radio crackled again. "Sir, the emergency aircraft is now 2 minutes from civilian impact. We need immediate assistance or we're looking at mass casualties." Maya was already moving toward the F-22. "Sir, I need authorization to launch, now." "You can't just," Harrison started. "Colonel," Senator Williams's voice cut through the chaos with surprising authority. "If this woman says she can fly that aircraft, let her fly it. The political fallout from a crashed Marine aircraft is nothing compared to the consequences of a crash in populated areas." Harrison looked at Maya, then at the F-22, then at the congressional delegation that was supposed to see a carefully controlled demonstration, not an emergency scramble to prevent mass casualties. "You're certain you can fly that aircraft?" he asked. "Sir, I designed half the systems on that aircraft. I can fly it better than anyone alive." Harrison made his decision. "Launch immediately. Tower, clear the emergency aircraft for Ghost Commander." Maya was already climbing into the F-22's cockpit, her hands moving with practiced efficiency through startup procedures that she had performed hundreds of times before. The aircraft's systems came alive under her touch, not with the hesitant responsiveness of an unfamiliar machine, but with the eager readiness of a weapon returning to the hands of its master. As the canopy closed and the engines spooled up to launch power, Maya felt 3 years of forced anonymity fall away like shed skin. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't pretending to be someone else anymore. She was Ghost Commander again, and she had a pilot to save. The F-22 Raptor screamed off the runway with a sound like controlled thunder, its twin engines pushing 70,000 pounds of thrust against the Nevada sky. Maya felt the familiar embrace of G-forces as the aircraft climbed at an angle that would have been impossible in any conventional fighter, the Raptor's thrust vectoring and advanced flight controls allowing maneuvers that defied physics as most pilots understood them. On the ground, the congressional delegation stood in stunned silence, watching the sleek fighter disappear into the azure sky with a speed and grace that made their earlier technical briefings suddenly seem inadequate. Senator Williams lowered her hand from shielding her eyes against the sun, her expression shifting from political calculation to something approaching awe. "Colonel Harrison," she said quietly, "that wasn't a demonstration takeoff." "No, ma'am," Harrison replied, his own voice tight with tension. "That was a combat. Scramble." Major Volkov stood beside the empty aircraft chocks, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. 3 minutes ago, he had been preparing to fly a routine demonstration for visiting politicians. Now he was watching a woman he had thought was a junior maintenance tech pilot, the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, with a level of skill that bordered on supernatural. "Sir," he said, turning to Harrison, "who exactly is Maya Chen?" Before Harrison could respond, Senior Master Sergeant Torres approached the group, his radio crackling with transmissions from the control tower. His face was pale, his usually steady demeanor shaken by what he was hearing through his headset. "Colonel, you need to hear this," Torres said, extending his radio toward the group. Maya's voice came through the static, calm and professional, but carrying an undertone of absolute authority that made everyone listening straighten unconsciously. "Nellis Tower, this is Ghost Commander. I have visual contact with the emergency aircraft. Marine FA-18E Super Hornet. Tail number 1 scene 8493, showing visible hydraulic leak from the right engine bay. Aircraft is in an uncontrolled descent. Pilot appears unconscious." The tower controller's response carried the strained professionalism of someone dealing with a situation beyond normal parameters. Ghost Commander, be advised you are not cleared for intercept operations. Return to base immediately. Tower, negative. That Super Hornet is 30 seconds from impacting civilian areas. I'm initiating emergency intercept protocols. In the background, they could hear other voices on military frequencies. Air Force search and rescue, Marine Corps operations, air traffic control, all trying to coordinate a response to an emergency that was unfolding faster than their procedures could handle. Captain Mitchell grabbed Volkov's arm. "Rick, did she just say Ghost Commander, as in the Ghost Commander?" Volkov's face went white. "That's impossible. Ghost Commander is a myth, urban legend. Test pilots talk about someone who could fly anything with wings, who set records that were classified so deep they don't officially exist. The pilot who allegedly flew the prototype missions for every Black Project aircraft of the last decade?" Mitchell's voice dropped to a whisper. "The one who supposedly died in a classified accident 3 years ago?" "Apparently she didn't die," Volkov said, his voice hollow with recognition. "She's been fixing our aircraft." On the radio, Maya's voice continued with the measured cadence of someone performing a dangerous mission with absolute precision. "Tower, I'm positioning alongside the emergency aircraft. Marine pilot is definitely unconscious. Aircraft is beginning to roll inverted. Initiating emergency wake-up procedures." Senator Williams stepped closer to Torres. "Sergeant, what are emergency wake-up procedures?" Torres's hands were shaking slightly as he adjusted his radio. "Ma'am, I don't know. That's not standard Air Force terminology." High above them, Maya maneuvered the F-22 into perfect formation with the descending Super Hornet. The Marine aircraft was bleeding hydraulic fluid in a steady stream, its control surfaces moving sluggishly as the pilot slumped unconscious in the cockpit. She could see his head lolled to one side, his hands fallen away from the controls, the aircraft beginning a slow roll that would become an unrecoverable dive in less than 30 seconds. Maya activated systems on the F-22 that weren't supposed to exist, classified electronic warfare capabilities that could interface with other aircraft systems in ways that no pilot manual described. She locked onto the Super Hornet's radio frequencies and began transmitting a signal that was designed to trigger every alarm in the Marine pilot's cockpit simultaneously. The effect was immediate. Warning lights flooded the Hornet's cockpit, alarms blared at maximum volume, and the pilot's unconscious body jerked in response to the sudden sensory overload. His head lifted, his hands moved instinctively to the controls, and his eyes focused on the world outside his canopy, where he saw an F-22 Raptor flying in perfect formation beside him, close enough that he could see the pilot's helmet through the stealth fighter's bubble canopy. "Marine aircraft, this is Ghost Commander. You're in an emergency descent with hydraulic failure. Do you copy?" The Marine pilot's voice came through the radio, groggy but conscious. "Ghost Commander, this is Captain Rodriguez. Call sign Hammer. Jesus, where am I? My instruments are going crazy." "Hammer, you're over Las Vegas with complete hydraulic failure. Your aircraft is not responding to control inputs. I need you to follow my instructions exactly." On the ground, the congressional delegation listened in fascination as Maya began talking the Marine pilot through emergency procedures that none of them had heard before. Her voice never wavered, never showed stress, but carried the kind of absolute confidence that made people trust her instinctively. "Hammer, you're going to use manual reversion for flight controls. Ignore your hydraulic gauges. They're not telling you anything useful right now. Feel the aircraft through the stick and rudder pedals." "Ghost Commander, I can't maintain altitude. This bird wants to roll left and dive." "Understood. I'm going to guide you to emergency landing coordinates. Stay with me and keep your aircraft level using trim tabs only." Major Volkov grabbed Torres's radio. "Ghost Commander, this is Major Volkov. What's your status?" Maya's response came immediately, but her attention remained focused on the emergency aircraft. "Volkov, I have control of the situation. Clear all air traffic from Vector 180, altitude 5,000 feet. I'm bringing Hammer to a controlled landing at Creech Air Force Base." "Controlled landing? That Hornet has no hydraulics. It's going to come in like a brick." "Negative. I can get him down safely, but I need clear airspace and emergency crews standing by." Captain Mitchell leaned toward Volkov. "Rick, she's talking about landing a Super Hornet with no hydraulics. That's barely survivable under perfect conditions." "I know. Volkov replied, his voice tight. "But if anyone can do it, it's Ghost Commander." Senator Williams had been listening to the exchange with growing amazement. Now she turned to Colonel Harrison with eyes that demanded answers. "Colonel, I want to know exactly who Major Maya Chen is, why she was assigned to maintenance duties under false identity, and why the Air Force has been hiding one of its most capable pilots." Harrison's jaw was set in a hard line. "Senator, that information is classified above my clearance level. What I can tell you is that Major Chen was involved in a classified incident 3 years ago that required her to assume a new identity for security reasons." "What kind of incident?" Before Harrison could respond, Torres's radio crackled with an update from Maya. "All stations, I have hammer established on final approach to Creech. Aircraft is stable, but will require emergency barrier engagement. Recommend all emergency vehicles be positioned for immediate response." In the distance, they could see 2 aircraft approaching from the northeast. The F-22 flying in precise formation with the damaged Super Hornet, guiding it toward the emergency landing strip at Creech Air Force Base 15 miles away. Major Volkov raised binoculars, tracking the pair of fighters as they descended toward the emergency airfield. What he saw through the lenses made him lower the binoculars slowly, his face pale with understanding. "She's not just flying formation," he said quietly. "She's physically guiding that Hornet. I can see her F-22 positioned to provide lift assistance if the Marine aircraft stalls." "Is that even possible?" Mitchell asked. "Not according to any manual I've read," Volkov replied, "but Ghost Commander always operated outside normal parameters." The radio fell silent for several long minutes as the 2 aircraft disappeared behind the mountains surrounding Creech Air Force Base. Then, Torres's radio crackled with the voice of the Creech Tower controller. "All stations, emergency aircraft is down safely. Pilot is conscious and responsive. Barrier engagement successful. No injuries reported." A collective exhale went up from the assembled group. Senator Williams turned to face Harrison directly, her expression no longer that of a politician evaluating a budget item, but of someone who had just witnessed something extraordinary. "Colonel, I think we need to revise our understanding of what the F-22 program has accomplished," she said, "and I think we need to have a very serious conversation about Major Chen." 20 minutes later, the F-22 appeared on the horizon, returning to Nellis with the kind of smooth precision that made the aircraft look like it was floating, rather than flying. Maya brought the fighter in for a landing that was so gentle it barely raised dust from the runway, taxiing to the flight line where the congressional delegation waited with expressions that had transformed from political skepticism to something approaching reverence. As the canopy opened and Maya began her post-flight shutdown procedures, Major Volkov realized that everything he thought he knew about his squadron, his aircraft, and the capabilities of the people around him had just been turned upside down. The quiet maintenance tech who had fixed their F-22 in 20 minutes wasn't a senior airman with mysterious background training. She was quite possibly the most skilled pilot any of them had ever encountered, hidden in plain sight for reasons that were classified above their pay grades. And now her cover was blown completely, witnessed by senators, generals, and a dozen support personnel who would be talking about what they had seen for the rest of their careers. Maya Chen, Major Maya Chen, call sign Ghost Commander, was no longer invisible. The question was what would happen next. Maya's boots touched the tarmac with the solid thump of someone returning from a routine training flight, not someone who had just saved a pilot's life while simultaneously revealing a classified identity to a congressional oversight committee. She pulled off her helmet, her dark hair escaping in wisps around her face, and began the methodical process of post-flight procedures that were as automatic as breathing. But nothing about this situation was routine, and everyone watching her knew it. Senator Williams approached the aircraft with measured steps, her political instincts warring with genuine curiosity about what she had just witnessed. Behind her, the other members of the congressional delegation followed at a respectful distance, their expressions caught between amazement and confusion. Colonel Harrison was the first to reach Maya as she climbed down from the cockpit. His face was pale, his jaw set in the kind of tight line that suggested someone was about to have a very difficult conversation. "Major Chen," he said, his voice carefully neutral, I believe we need to discuss your actual assignment to this base. Maya set her helmet on the aircraft's maintenance platform and turned to face him directly. For the first time since arriving at Nellis 3 weeks ago, she stood with the bearing of an officer rather than an enlisted airman. The difference was subtle but unmistakable, shoulders back, chin level, eyes that met his gaze without the careful deference she had been maintaining. "Yes, sir," she said. "I believe we do." Senator Williams stepped forward, extending her hand. "Major Chen, I'm Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Armed Services Subcommittee on Air Power. What you just demonstrated was remarkable." Maya shook the senator's hand with the firm grip of someone accustomed to dealing with high-ranking officials. "Thank you, ma'am. I was just doing my job." "Your job as a maintenance technician, or your job as what appears to be one of the most skilled pilots in the Air Force?" The question hung in the desert air like heat shimmer. Maya glanced at Colonel Harrison, who gave an almost imperceptible nod, permission to speak freely about things that had been classified for 3 years. "Ma'am, both. My assignment to maintenance duties was part of a cover identity. My actual role has been more complex." Major Volkov had been standing several feet away, but now he approached with the expression of someone who needed answers to questions that had been eating at him for the past hour. "Major, I need to know. Are you the Ghost Commander? The test pilot who supposedly died in a classified accident 3 years ago?" Maya's pause was brief, but in that moment of hesitation, everyone present saw confirmation of what they had already begun to suspect. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying secrets for far too long. "Yes, sir. I'm Ghost Commander, and I didn't die. I was reassigned under deep cover following the incident at Groom Lake." The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock and understanding that spread through the assembled group. Groom Lake, Area 51, was a name that carried implications none of them were fully cleared to understand, but all of them recognized as significant beyond normal classification levels. Captain Mitchell stepped forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The Groom Lake incident 3 years ago. The one that killed 6 test pilots and grounded the entire prototype program?" "I was the only survivor," Maya said simply, "the only witness to what actually happened that day. And what I saw was problematic for certain people in positions of authority." Senator Williams's political instincts sharpened immediately. "Problematic how?" Maya glanced again at Colonel Harrison, who now looked like a man who had just realized his quiet little base was about to become the center of a congressional investigation that would reach into the darkest corners of classified aerospace programs. "Ma'am, the accident at Groom Lake wasn't caused by mechanical failure or pilot error. It was the result of orders given by senior officials who prioritized political considerations over pilot safety. Orders that I was instructed to forget in the interest of national security." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause as the implications of her statement settled over the group. "You're saying the crash was preventable?" Williams asked. "I'm saying the crash was ordered," Maya replied, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of long-suppressed anger. "We were told to test prototype systems that hadn't passed basic safety protocols. When I raised concerns, I was told that the test schedule was more important than preliminary safety data." Senator Williams felt her blood pressure spike. 6 dead Air Force test pilots, billions of dollars in lost aircraft and research, and now allegations of criminal negligence at the highest levels of the defense establishment. "Who gave those orders, Major?" "Ma'am, that information is still classified, but the people responsible are still in positions where they can make the same decisions again." Before Williams could respond, Senior Master Sergeant Torres approached the group, his radio crackling with transmissions that made everyone turn to listen. "Sir," Torres said to Colonel Harrison, "I'm getting calls from the Pentagon. Word about what happened here today is already moving up the chain of command. They want to speak with Major Chen immediately." Maya's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, recognition that her 3 years of anonymity had just ended permanently. "How immediately?" Harrison asked. "Sir, there's a secure call holding for her right now, Priority 1 classification." Maya looked around the group, her gaze settling on the congressional delegation. Senator Williams, you asked who gave the orders that killed my squadron. The person on that secure line is probably one of them. Williams stepped closer, her voice dropping to a tone that carried 30 years of political experience. Major, before you take that call, I want you to understand something. The Armed Services Committee has oversight authority over every black project in the Defense Department. If you've been silenced to protect someone who caused preventable deaths, that silence ends now. Ma'am, with respect, that's not your decision to make. Actually, it is, Williams said firmly. Under Title 10, congressional oversight supersedes classification when there's evidence of criminal negligence or cover-up. If you have information about decisions that caused the deaths of American pilots, you have a legal obligation to provide that information to appropriate oversight authorities. Maya felt a weight she had been carrying for 3 years begin to shift. For the first time since the Groom Lake incident, someone with actual authority was telling her that the truth mattered more than the secrets that protected the guilty. Major Volkov was watching this exchange with growing understanding of just how far beyond routine military operations this situation had evolved. Major, that call from the Pentagon, they're going to order you to maintain classification, aren't they? Almost certainly, Maya replied. The same people who buried my testimony 3 years ago aren't going to be happy that I just revealed my identity to a congressional oversight committee. And if you refuse to maintain classification? Maya's smile was thin and sharp. Then I'll finally be able to sleep at night. Senator Williams pulled out her phone, dialing a number that connected directly to her chief of staff in Washington. This is Williams. I need an emergency hearing. Scheduled for tomorrow morning. Full Armed Services Committee, closed session, highest security clearance. We have a whistleblower with information about classified program negligence. As Williams spoke, Maya felt the last of her carefully constructed anonymity dissolve completely. In the span of an hour, she had gone from invisible maintenance technician to congressional witness in a case that would probably end careers and might well result in criminal charges against people who had been untouchable for decades. Colonel Harrison approached her, his expression troubled. Major, you understand what you're walking into? Once you testify to Congress, there's no going back. No more cover identity, no more quiet assignments. You'll be visible to every enemy this country has. Sir, I've been hiding for 3 years while the people responsible for killing my squadron continued making decisions that put other pilots at risk. I can't do that anymore. Torres's radio crackled again. Major Chen, the Pentagon is demanding to speak with you immediately. They're threatening disciplinary action if you don't take the call. Maya looked at the radio, then at Senator Williams, then at the F-22 Raptor that had carried her back into the sky and back into the light. She made her decision. Tell the Pentagon that Major Chen is currently providing testimony to the Armed Services Committee regarding classified program oversight. I'll be available to speak with them after I've completed my congressional obligations. Torres's eyes widened. Ma'am, they're not going to accept that answer. Then they can file a complaint with Senator Williams, Maya replied calmly. Williams finished her phone call and returned to the group, her expression set in the hard lines of someone who had just committed to a political battle that would have consequences far beyond this desert airfield. Major Chen, you'll be in Washington tomorrow morning. Full congressional protection, full immunity for your testimony, and full investigation into the Groom Lake incident. Maya nodded slowly. After 3 years of silence, she was finally going to tell the truth about what had happened to her squadron. The whole truth, regardless of whose careers it destroyed or whose secrets it exposed. There's one more thing, ma'am, she said. The technology that killed my squadron, it's still being developed, still being tested, and the next group of pilots ordered to test it might not be as lucky as I was. Senator Williams felt ice form in her stomach. What do you mean? I mean, this isn't just about justice for what happened 3 years ago. This is about preventing it from happening again. The Nevada sun beat down on the assembled group, but suddenly everyone felt very cold indeed. Maya Chen had just revealed that the classified program that had killed 6 test pilots was not only still active, but still potentially deadly. And the people responsible were still in charge. If you're hooked on this, Story. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more inspiring military stories like this one. The news spread through Nellis Air Force Base like wildfire in dry grass. Within an hour of Maya's emergency flight, every pilot, every maintenance tech, every administrator on base knew that the quiet senior airman who had been fixing their aircraft was actually Major Maya Chen, the legendary ghost commander who had supposedly died 3 years ago. In the 412th Test Wing Squadron building, pilots gathered around computers, pulling up every piece of unclassified information they could find about the mythical test pilot who had apparently been walking among them in disguise. What they found were fragments, mission reports with blacked-out sections, aircraft specifications that referenced Ghost Commander test protocols, and performance metrics that seemed too extraordinary to be real. Captain Lisa Zhang stood in front of a computer screen displaying a partially declassified flight report, her voice barely above a whisper as she read aloud to the assembled pilots. Test pilot successfully demonstrated unprecedented aircraft control during emergency simulation. Subject maintained formation flight with disabled aircraft while simultaneously coordinating ground control and executing system overrides not covered in standard flight manuals. She looked up at her colleagues. This report is from 5 years ago. She's been doing impossible things for longer than any of us have been flying F-22s. Major Volkov sat in the corner, his expression troubled. We've been working alongside one of the most accomplished test pilots in Air Force history, and we treated her like she didn't belong near a cockpit. How were we supposed to know? Captain Mitchell asked. Her records showed maintenance training, not flight training. Her records were fake, Volkov replied grimly. Everything about her assignment here was designed to hide who she really is. The question is why. They got their answer 20 minutes later, when Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Pierce entered the briefing room, her expression set in the hard lines of someone delivering news that nobody wanted to hear. Pierce had just returned from an emergency teleconference with Air Force Personnel Command, and the information she carried was going to change how everyone on the base understood the past 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Pierce began, I've just received a classified briefing on Major Chen's actual assignment to this base. What I'm about to tell you is compartmentalized information, but given today's events, you're all going to be read into the program whether you want to be or not. She paused, looking around the room at faces that were already showing the strain of having their assumptions turned upside down. Major Maya Chen, call sign Ghost Commander, was the lead test pilot for Project Looking Glass, a classified program developing next-generation avionics and flight control systems. 3 years ago, she was the sole survivor of an aircraft accident that killed 6 other test pilots during a flight test that should never have been authorized. The room went absolutely silent. Major Chen attempted to report that the accident was caused by negligent orders from senior officials who overrode safety protocols for political reasons. Her testimony was classified, her identity was sealed, and she was reassigned to maintenance duties under the cover of Senior Airman Chen to protect her from retaliation while investigators pursued her allegations. Captain Zhang raised her hand tentatively. Ma'am, what happened to the investigation? Pierce's expression darkened. It was suspended due to national security considerations. The officials Major Chen accused were never charged, never disciplined, never removed from their positions. She's been in protective custody for 3 years, waiting for someone with enough authority to reopen the case. Major Volkov stood up slowly. And now she's blown her cover to save a Marine pilot in front of a congressional oversight committee. Correct, which means her protective status is ended, her cover identity is compromised, and she's about to become the most visible whistleblower in modern Air Force history. The pilots absorbed this information in stunned silence. The woman they had dismissed, ignored, and underestimated was actually a decorated test pilot who had been hidden among them as protection against retaliation from officials who had caused the deaths of her squadron. Outside the squadron building, the news was spreading through the maintenance hangar with similar shock. Senior Master Sergeant Torres stood in front of his assembled maintenance crews, many of whom had worked alongside Maya for 3 weeks without having any idea who she really was. People, Torres said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years in the Air Force. I want you to understand what we've learned today. Senior Airman Chen, Major Chen, is one of the most accomplished aviators in the Air Force. She's been working in our hangar because someone tried to silence her testimony about senior officials who caused preventable pilot deaths. Airman First Class Rodriguez, who had been mocking Maya's supposed inexperience just that morning, looked sick. Sergeant, I said things. We all said things. Yes, you did, Torres replied grimly. And now you understand why she never responded. She was protecting you from the consequences of knowing who she really is. Staff Sergeant Williams, the crew chief who had questioned Maya's qualifications, stepped forward. What happens now, Sergeant? Now she's going to testify to Congress about what really happened at Groom Lake, and we're going to do everything in our power to support her. The transformation in attitude was immediate and profound. Maintenance personnel who had viewed Maya as an outsider, an interloper in their carefully organized world, suddenly understood that she was someone who deserved their respect, their protection, and their loyalty. But the most significant change was happening in the most unexpected place. Across the flight line, in the VIP area where the congressional delegation was receiving an extended briefing on the F-22 program, Senator Williams was making phone calls that would reverberate through the Pentagon and the halls of Congress for months to come. General Morrison, Williams said into her secure phone, her voice carrying the kind of steel that made four-star generals pay attention. I'm calling about Major Maya Chen and Project Looking Glass. I want a full briefing on the Groom Lake incident, and I want it on my desk before Major Chen testifies tomorrow morning. The voice on the other end was carefully neutral. Senator, that information is classified above congressional oversight level. General, let me be very clear about something. I have a decorated Air Force officer who claims that negligent orders from senior officials caused the deaths of 6 test pilots. She has agreed to testify under oath about what she witnessed. If you want to maintain classification on that information, you can explain your reasoning to the full Armed Services Committee in open session. The silence on the line spoke volumes. Now, Williams continued, you can provide that briefing voluntarily, or I can subpoena it, your choice. Senator, I'll have someone from the Inspector General's office contact your staff within the hour. Thank you, General. And just so we're clear, Major Chen is under congressional protection as of right now. If anyone from the Pentagon, the Air Force, or any other agency attempts to interfere with her testimony, I will consider it obstruction of a congressional investigation. Williams ended the call and turned to find Maya standing nearby, having approached during the conversation with the careful steps of someone who had learned to be invisible. Major, I couldn't help but overhear. Thank you for protecting me, ma'am, but that may not be enough. What do you mean? Maya's expression was troubled. The people involved in the Groom Lake incident have spent 3 years making sure this story never came to light. They're not going to let congressional oversight stop them now. Are you saying they might try to silence you? I'm saying they already tried once, ma'am. The accident that killed my squadron wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate. They ordered us to test systems they knew would fail because they needed the failure to look like pilot error rather than design flaw. Senator Williams felt the political ground shifting beneath her feet. You're saying the crash was intentional? I'm saying 6 of the Air Force's best test pilots were murdered to cover up a failed weapons program, and the people responsible are still in positions where they can do it again. The weight of that revelation settled over Williams like a physical force. This wasn't just about negligence or bureaucratic cover-up. This was about deliberate killing of American military personnel to protect classified programs and the careers of the people who mismanaged them. Major, tomorrow morning you're going to tell this story to the most powerful oversight committee in Congress. You're going to name names, provide evidence, and give us everything we need to pursue criminal charges. Maya nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am, all of it. As the sun set over Nellis Air Force Base, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Maya Chen walked across the flight line one last time as a hidden figure. Tomorrow, she would be Major Chen, congressional witness, and quite possibly the most important whistleblower in modern military history. Behind her, The F-22 Raptor sat silent on the tarmac, its systems powered down but ready. The aircraft that had carried her back into the sky, back into the fight, back into the light. In the hangar, maintenance crews worked with a different energy now, not just maintaining aircraft, but maintaining them for someone they now understood deserved their absolute best efforts, someone who had sacrificed her career, her identity, and her safety to protect other pilots from the fate that had claimed her squadron. In the squadron building, pilots who had dismissed her competence now understood they had been working alongside a legend, someone whose skills exceeded their own by margins they were only beginning to comprehend. And in Washington, political wheels were beginning to turn that would either bring justice to the people responsible for 6 pilot deaths or destroy the career of the woman brave enough to demand that justice. Maya Chen was no longer Ghost Commander in hiding. She was Ghost Commander returning to the fight. The secure conference room in the Pentagon's E-ring hummed with the kind of tension that preceded career-ending conversations. Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Kellerman sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, his usually immaculate appearance showing subtle signs of stress. Loosened tie, wrinkled sleeves, the hollow look of someone who had spent the past 6 hours receiving phone calls that got progressively worse. Across from him, Brigadier General Patricia Hodges reviewed classified documents with the mechanical precision of someone buying time before delivering catastrophic news. General Morrison sat to her left, his star-heavy uniform contrasting sharply with an expression that suggested he was contemplating early retirement. "Gentlemen," Kellerman said, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had learned to control his reactions during 30 years of Washington politics. "Explain to me how a supposedly dead test pilot just provided testimony to Congress about allegations we spent 3 years burying." General Morrison cleared his throat. "Sir, Major Chen's cover identity was compromised. During an emergency flight at Nellis, she was forced to reveal her true qualifications to save a Marine pilot." "Forced?" Kellerman's voice rose slightly. "She chose to blow her own cover rather than let proper authorities handle the situation." "With respect, sir," Hodges interjected, "there were no proper authorities available. The emergency required immediate action by someone with her specific qualifications." Kellerman stood and walked to the room's only window, which overlooked the Potomac River. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had built his career on managing classified programs and controlling information flow. Now, he was facing the possibility that 3 years of careful damage control were about to unravel in congressional hearing rooms. "General Hodges, refresh my memory about the Groom Lake incident." Hodges opened a thick file marked with classification stamps that covered most of the visible text. "Sir, 3 years ago, Major Chen was the lead test pilot for Project Looking Glass, a classified avionics program. During a test flight, 6 aircraft experienced simultaneous system failures that resulted in fatal crashes." "System failures," Kellerman repeated. "Not pilot error, not weather, system failures." "Correct, sir. Major Chen was the only pilot who successfully executed emergency procedures and survived the incident." "And her testimony afterward?" Hodges paused, choosing her words carefully. Major Chen alleged that the test flight was authorized despite known safety concerns. She claimed that senior officials overrode engineering recommendations in order to maintain political timeline commitments. Kellerman turned from the window. "Alleged, claimed, but never proven." "No, sir. The investigation was suspended due to national security considerations." "National security," Kellerman said slowly. "Or the fact that proving her allegations would have ended several careers and compromised a $2 billion program?" General Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, the decision to suspend the investigation came from the highest levels. Multiple agencies agreed that pursuing the allegations would damage national security interests. And now, Senator Williams is demanding full documentation of that decision, complete witness testimony, and criminal referrals for anyone involved in covering up pilot deaths." Kellerman returned to his seat, his expression grim. "How exactly do you suggest we handle this situation?" Before either officer could answer, Kellerman's secure phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a call from the highest levels of government. He answered with professional calm, but his expression grew increasingly troubled as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Yes, sir." I understand. No, sir, we don't have containment. Yes, sir, I'll handle it personally. He ended the call and looked at the two generals with eyes that had gone cold. That was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The President is personally interested in this case. He wants full transparency and complete cooperation with congressional oversight. General Morrison went pale. Sir, full transparency means we're going to provide Senator Williams with everything she's asking for. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of evidence related to the Groom Lake incident. Sir, Hodges said carefully, that includes materials that implicate senior officials in decisions that directly caused pilot deaths. I'm aware of what it includes, General. The room fell silent as the implications settled over the three officials. Full transparency meant the end of the cover-up. It meant criminal investigations, congressional hearings, and the very real possibility that people who had been protected for 3 years were about to face consequences for decisions that had killed 6 American pilots. Kellerman's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Senator Williams's direct line. Deputy Secretary Kellerman, he answered. Mr. Kellerman, this is Senator Williams. I'm calling to inform you that Major Chen's testimony tomorrow will be given under full congressional immunity and protection. I'm also calling to request your personal cooperation with our investigation. Senator, you have my complete cooperation, whatever information you need. What I need, Mr. Kellerman, is for you to explain how the Pentagon allowed a cover-up of pilot deaths to continue for 3 years. I need you to explain why a decorated officer was hidden in maintenance duties instead of being protected as a whistleblower. And I need you to explain why the people responsible for killing 6 test pilots are still in positions where they can make similar decisions. Kellerman closed his eyes briefly. Senator, I'll provide complete answers to all of those questions. In person, Mr. Kellerman. Tomorrow morning, same hearing room, same time as Major Chen's testimony. The American people deserve to hear directly from senior defense officials about how this situation was handled. Senator, I'll be there. After Williams ended the call, Kellerman sat in silence for several long minutes. Finally, he looked at the two generals and spoke with the weary tone of someone who had just realized his career was ending. General Morrison, I want you to contact every official who was involved in the original Groom Lake investigation. Tell them they are going to be called to testify to Congress about their roles in the cover-up. Sir, that's going to include some very senior people. I don't care if it includes the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This cover-up ends tomorrow. He stood and gathered his papers. And I want both of you to understand something. For 3 years, we've been protecting people who made decisions that killed American pilots. We've been more concerned about careers and programs than we have been about justice and accountability. Kellerman paused at the door. That ends now. Major Chen had the courage to survive that crash and tell the truth about what caused it. The least we can do is have the courage to face the consequences of our failure to listen to her. As Kellerman left the conference room, Generals Morrison and Hodges sat in stunned silence. In the space of a single day, the careful architecture of classification, cover-up, and institutional protection had collapsed completely. Tomorrow morning, Maya Chen would tell her story to Congress and to the American people. She would name the officials who had ordered her squadron to fly aircraft they knew were unsafe. She would provide evidence of decisions that had prioritized political timelines over pilot safety. And the people responsible, people who had spent 3 years believing they were untouchable, were about to discover that congressional oversight and public accountability could reach into even the most classified corners of the defense establishment. In her hotel room near Capitol Hill, Maya Chen sat at a desk covered with documents, photographs, and technical reports that told the story of Project Looking Glass and the decisions that had killed her squadron. She had spent 3 years in silence, 3 years hiding, 3 years watching the people responsible for her friends' deaths continue their careers without consequence. Tomorrow, the silence ended. Tomorrow she would finally be able to keep the promise she had made to her fallen squadron, that their deaths would not be forgotten, would not be covered up, and would not be allowed to happen to other pilots. Tomorrow, Ghost Commander would speak for the dead. 6 months after Maya Chen's congressional testimony, Nellis Air Force Base looked almost exactly the same on the surface. The same F-22 Raptors sat on the same flight line, maintained by many of the same personnel, ready to demonstrate American air superiority to visiting dignitaries and oversight committees. But everything that mattered had changed. Maya walked across the tarmac in the early Nevada morning, wearing the flight suit of a lieutenant colonel and the confident bearing of someone who no longer had to hide who she was. The silver oak leaves on her shoulders caught the desert sunlight, a promotion that had come with her new assignment as commander of the 412th Test Wing's Advanced Systems Development Squadron. It wasn't just a promotion, it was a statement. Behind her, a small group of test pilots followed with the kind of attention that came from working under someone whose reputation preceded them into every briefing room, every hangar, every conversation about the future of military aviation. These weren't the skeptical colleagues who had dismissed her months earlier. These were hand-picked pilots who had requested transfer to her unit specifically to work with the legendary Ghost Commander. Major Rick Volkov was among them, his former arrogance replaced by the humility of someone who had learned the difference between rank and competence. He approached Maya as she stopped beside the same F-22 that had carried her back into the sky and back into the fight. "Colonel Chen," he said, his voice carrying genuine respect, "the morning brief is ready whenever you are." Maya nodded, her hand resting briefly on the aircraft's fuselage. "How are the new pilots adapting to the advanced protocols?" "Better than expected," Volkov replied. "Having actual documentation of the systems you've been using makes a significant difference. The transparency is refreshing." That transparency had been one of the most significant changes to emerge from Maya's congressional testimony. The classified techniques, system overrides, and capabilities that had been locked away in black programs were now being integrated into standard Air Force training. Pilots were learning procedures that had previously been available only to a handful of test pilots with security clearances above top secret. As they walked toward the squadron building, Maya noticed Senior Master Sergeant Torres waiting near the entrance. He approached with a folder in his hand and an expression that suggested important news. "Colonel, I've got the final report on the Looking Glass safety review." Maya accepted the folder, scanning the executive summary with the trained eye of someone who had seen too many reports that said everything and revealed nothing. But this one was different. This one contained the accountability she had been seeking for 3 years. The Admiral's Board concluded that the Groom Lake incident was directly caused by negligent oversight and willful disregard for established safety protocols, Torres said. 7 senior officials have been relieved of command, 3 are facing court-martial, and the entire project oversight structure has been rebuilt from the ground up. Maya felt something ease in her chest that had been tight for 3 years. Not relief exactly, nothing could bring back the pilots who had died, but acknowledgement that their deaths had finally been recognized for what they were, preventable tragedies caused by officials who had valued politics over pilot safety. "What about the technology itself?" she asked. "Completely redesigned with new safety protocols. No test flights authorized without unanimous safety board approval. No exceptions, no matter who's asking for them." Maya nodded slowly. That should have been policy from the beginning. Inside the squadron building, the morning brief was unlike any that had been conducted at Nellis before Maya's return to flight status. The room was filled with test pilots, safety officers, engineering representatives, and congressional liaison staff, a transparency that would have been unthinkable under the old system of compartmentalized information and need-to-know restrictions. Maya stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention without requiring volume or dramatics. When she spoke, her voice carried the outward authority of someone who had earned respect through competence rather than rank. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to discuss the integration of advanced avionics systems with existing F-22 platforms. The procedures we'll be covering were previously classified, but congressional oversight has determined that pilot safety requires broader distribution of this information." She activated the briefing display, showing technical specifications that had been locked away for years. These systems were developed through programs that prioritized secrecy over safety. That approach killed 6 of the best pilots I've ever known. We're going to make sure it never happens again. The pilots in the room listened with the kind of attention that came from knowing they were learning from someone who had survived what killed others. Maya's briefings had become legendary throughout the Air Force, not just for the technical information they provided, but for the honesty with which she discussed the costs and risks of advanced aviation technology. Captain Lisa Zhang, now a major and one of Maya's deputy commanders, raised her hand. "Colonel, how do we balance the operational security requirements of advanced systems with the transparency needed for safe operations?" It was exactly the kind of question that would have been deflected or classified under the old system. Maya answered it directly. "Major Zhang, operational security protects capabilities from foreign intelligence. It doesn't protect officials from accountability or pilots from preventable deaths. We can maintain security while ensuring that safety information reaches the people who need it to stay alive." After the briefing, Maya walked to the memorial wall that had been expanded to include the 6 pilots lost at Groom Lake. Their photographs now hung beside other fallen airmen, but with a notation that hadn't been there before. Killed in the line of duty, due to preventable negligence, their sacrifice led to improved safety protocols that protect current and future aviators. It wasn't much, but it was truth. And truth was what Maya had been fighting for since the moment she climbed out of her damaged F-22 3 years ago, the only survivor of an incident that should never have happened. Senior Airman Rodriguez approached her at the memorial wall, wearing maintenance insignia, but carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had learned from the best. Maya had specifically requested his assignment to her squadron, remembering his willingness to question and learn during her time undercover. "Colonel," Rodriguez said quietly, "I wanted to thank you for the recommendation letter. The Air Force Academy accepted my application." Maya smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her during the months when she had been hiding her identity. "You earned it, Rodriguez. You've got the integrity and curiosity that make good officers. The Academy will be lucky to have you." "Ma'am, will you tell me something? During the time when we thought you were Senior Airman Chen, did you ever regret having to hide who you really were?" Maya considered the question carefully. "Every day. But I also understood why it was necessary. The people who killed my squadron needed to be exposed safely, with proper congressional oversight. If I had revealed my identity earlier, they might have found ways to discredit my testimony or silence me permanently. And now? Now they're facing court-martial proceedings, and the safety protocols they ignored are being implemented throughout the Air Force. Sometimes the long game is the only game that actually works." As the day progressed, Maya found herself in the paradoxical position of being more visible as a lieutenant colonel than she had ever been as a senior airman. Congressional staff visited regularly to monitor implementation of the safety reforms her testimony had triggered. Aviation journalists wrote articles about the resurrection of Ghost Commander and the implications of her return to flight status. Military historians requested interviews about the evolution of test pilot programs and congressional oversight of classified aviation projects. But the attention Maya valued most came from the young pilots and maintenance personnel who approached her with the kind of respect she had earned through competence rather than rank. They understood that she was someone who had refused to let preventable deaths be covered up, who had sacrificed her career to ensure their safety, who had proven that truth was more important than institutional protection of incompetent officials. That evening, Maya stood on the flight line as the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The F-22s sat silent in their revetments, ready for tomorrow's training flights, maintained by crews who understood their responsibilities to the pilots who trusted them with their lives. Senator Williams approached from the parking area, having arrived for a routine oversight visit that was part of the new transparency protocols Maya's testimony had established. She walked with the measured steps of someone who had learned to appreciate the weight of the changes her investigation had triggered. "Colonel Chen," Williams said, extending her hand, "how are the new protocols working in practice?" "Better than expected, ma'am," Maya replied. "Transparency doesn't compromise security. It enhances it by ensuring that decisions are made by people who understand the actual risks and capabilities involved." Williams nodded. "And the personnel changes? How are the new safety review boards functioning?" The people making decisions about pilot safety are now people who have actually flown the aircraft and understand the systems involved. It's a significant improvement over having bureaucrats make life-and-death decisions based on PowerPoint presentations. What about resistance from within the Pentagon? I imagine not everyone was happy about the changes. Maya's expression grew thoughtful. Ma'am, institutional change is always difficult. But when the alternative is dead pilots and covered-up negligence, most people find ways to adapt. As Williams departed, Maya remained on the flight line, looking up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, other test pilots were pushing the boundaries of what was possible in aviation technology. Some of them were flying aircraft that existed only in the most classified corners of the defense establishment. Some of them were testing systems that wouldn't be acknowledged for decades. All of them were now protected by safety protocols that existed because 6 pilots had died, 1 pilot had survived, and that survivor had refused to let their deaths be forgotten or covered up. Maya Chen, Lieutenant Colonel Chen, Ghost Commander, had kept her promise to her fallen squadron. Their deaths had not been in vain. The system that had killed them had been reformed. The officials who had caused their deaths had been held accountable, and future pilots would fly with safety protections that had been written in the blood of those who died at Groom Lake, implemented through the testimony of the one who lived, and enforced by congressional oversight that would never again allow politics to override pilot safety. Ghost Commander was no longer a legend hiding in the shadows. She was a leader, building the future of military aviation on the foundation of truth, accountability, and the sacred obligation to bring every pilot home alive. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true tales keep the courage alive for generations to come. And in the comments, tell us where are you watching from and who's the quiet leader you'll never forget.